Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Sunday, November 2nd. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Jed Lowry here as we recap what was, I think, one of the best World Series matchups of the last, let's say, at least 20 years, right? I don't have the Rolodex. I wasn't alive for 70s, 80s, 90s World Series. I was alive for the 90s. I don't remember them that well to say that, all-time great series across all series, but I think it was one of the better series that we have seen in our adult lifetimes. We'll dig into why Game 7 was an instant classic. Game 6, we'll probably get to a little bit of that later on in the show. Had some amazing moments in it as well. But you're probably waking up already either happy or sad that the Dodgers took this series. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the conversation when the Dodgers were down started to dig into their flaws as being fatal flaws. And those rumors of the Dodgers' demise were proven to be false over the last 48 hours or so. But this was a Game 7 that had everything. We had Max Scherzer pitch well for 4 1/3 innings, which was a great story given how the end of the regular season went for him, right? For him to come back and add another chapter of really strong postseason performances, that was nice to see. Bo Bichette hit a 442-foot homer off of Ohtani on one bad leg, and that looked like it was actually going to hold for a while as a possible huge moment in Blue Jays franchise history. There were some amazing defensive plays. There was some interesting base running. I mean, every single box. Eventually, we saw Yoshinobu Yamamoto finish this out for the Dodgers. He started Game 6. And I think, guys, I was goldfishing it a little bit. I couldn't remember the last time someone who started Game 6 and pitched like a regular starter came back and pitched in Game 7. Randy Johnson did it in 2001. That was really the last time that someone did that in a very similar sort of vein. And I think Yamamoto actually went further into the game than Randy Johnson did almost 25 years ago when that happened. But you probably couldn't have wrote a better script for a Game 7 than this, and we had even the most improbable of game-tying home runs. Miguel Rojas hit a game-tying home run to save the Dodgers' season. Like, what else could we have asked for?
That was amazing.
Nothing. Yeah, truly. I mean, you couldn't have asked for anything else. I mean, as a baseball fan, to see that series go to Game 7, to see Game 7 play out the way that it did. Just must see TV on the edge of your seat the whole time.
Yeah, I want to contextualize it against other Game 7s. I was surprised. I've speaking of goldfishing, like Cubs against the Guardians.
That was a great Game 7 also,
and
really
that was
game.
I think I'd have to say that series was about as good as this one. If I'm looking at the scores, I mean, like there's a 1-0 game in there. The Cleveland went out and had like a 3-1 lead at some point, and then the Game 7 was just a weird one with the delay and the Rajai Davis homer and
Yep.
I mean that was a pretty epic series and an epic Game 7. So I think that you could put that one up against this one, but it was a really great series. And what I liked about this one that really stood out for me was just, I guess, the starting pitching. I mean, that seems to be the story. You get Yoshinobu Yamamoto gets the MVP for what he did. It was the 4th best by championship win probability added in the history of baseball. And it had some similarities to the Madison Bumgarner experience in 2014. Now, Madison Bumgarner threw 12 more innings.
But, it's a different era.
Yeah, different era, I guess, 2014. But I just when I hope what I will remember of this one. I think when I look back, I will remember some standout Shohei Ohtani performances, Yamamoto, of course, but also Savage just being so great. I thought Gossman pitched really well. Bieber was a little bit up and down, but just generally, if you think about the best pitching in this series, it was the starters, and they really stood out.
No, but even they brought in, they were bringing starters in from the bullpen. Both teams. I mean, we talked about this earlier in the season, but the Toronto bullpen and the Dodger bullpen, like not what I think either team expected, and ultimately the Toronto bullpen is it's kind of hard to put it on one guy. I know Hoffman came out and said that he cost his teammates a World Series. I think that's a little being a little harsh on himself. It's hard to imagine that you're Hoffman on the mound. You're like, all right, I'm going to get this 3-2 slider over the plate. There's no chance Miguel Rojas is hitting a home run here, right? Like he might get a base hit. He's not hitting a home run.
Right.
And you're thinking about Ohtani in that instance. Like you're thinking about the guy coming up later.
Exactly.
You have to throw this in the zone. But
exactly.
to Rojas' credit, I think that, he just anticipated that. I mean, if you looked at the way that he hit it, he was looking for a slider. And he was looking for a slider.
I mean, I think he was, I think he was geared up for the fastball. It was just the slider was in such a bad spot that he kept his hands, because he looked what we would call like comfortably out front. Right?
Yeah, he looks out
like
front.
Comfortably out front. So to me, that means he's geared up for the fastball, and the slider was in. It was hung enough that he could keep his hands back and elevate the baseball. So it really came down to pitch location on that one. And once again, like if you're Hoffman, you're just thinking, I just got to get this over the plate. This guy, I respect him. He can hit, but I'm not expecting him to be able to hit that ball out.
There's also just, the 3-2 slider, it's a modern phenomenon. I mean, it used to be, when you were in a 3-2 count, you're in a 3-1 count, you're a lot likely to throw fastballs. And I think that there is no more fastball count. You're even seeing a lot fewer fastballs, even on 0-0 counts.
3-0, you're just as likely to get off speed.
And so that worked into, I got a question on the socials about the efficacy of sliders and sweepers versus splitters. And so I made this chart that shows that over the last 5 years, hitters have been better against sliders and sweepers and splitters with every year. Basically, every year is just an improvement over the last. And that makes sense because they're seeing fewer fastballs. They're seeing more of these. They train for them. Their eyes see them more often. Your pitchers are going to hang more. If you throw a bunch more sliders, you're more likely to hang one. If you ask more pitchers to throw more the splitters and sweepers, you're going to get more bad sweepers and splitters because you're just inviting more people to the party, right? That's just how math works. If there's more of them, there's going to be some worse ones, just because of the spread of the population. Now, if you made that same graph for the postseason, it would be a little bit more erratic because year to year, just it's a different. There's a sample bias, like who's pitching, who are the pitchers in this group every year. It's different for every postseason, but you'd see the same general trend, which is generally over time, hitters have gotten better against sliders and sweepers. And what you saw last night were, I think, 3 homers off of sliders and sweepers in that game. The one thing that sticks out a little bit is that splitters have been a little bit resistant to this trend. So, if you look at splitters in the postseason over the last 4 years, they've been consistently the best pitch in the postseason. And this year they gave up a 207 WOBA. If you don't speak WOBA, that's a 250 slugging with a 150 batting average with a 42% whiff rate. Splitters did this postseason. So they've been a little bit resistant to that trend. And I don't know if that's meaningful. Do splitters hide better with fastballs? They look more like fastballs coming out of the hand. Or do we just see the best splitters in baseball? Because we saw Savage's splitter, we saw Gossman's splitter, we saw Yamamoto's splitter, we saw Sasaki's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sasaki,
these are probably 4 of the best 5 splitters in baseball.
Yeah, I think there's a little selection bias there, but Roki, for example, I mean, that splitter is just devastating. He's throwing 100 with a mid 80s. I would probably call it a forkball more than a splitter. I mean, the depth on that pitch is just outrageous. So
let me ask you something really quickly, Jed.
Yeah.
Rocky's numbers in terms of like strikeouts minus walks, in terms of like ERA and what he's done as a reliever has been really good. He's thrown 100, but his strikeout minus walk rate is something like 17% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate. So from like sort of an analytical standpoint, I think he'll be good as a reliever. Do you think it's a no doubt that he'll be a great closer if he wants to be a closer?
I think unless he develops 1 or 2 additional pitches that he can throw for strikes consistently, I think that's his role. I think as a 2-pitch guy, I think you're kind of destined to be a closer in the major leagues. I think he'd be good at it. He needs to. You could tell there was a little. He lost a little bit of confidence in his ability to throw strikes, particularly with the fastball. There were some like deer in the headlights looks on his eyes at some points in those games. So I think he's a kind of absorbing the major leagues. Don't forget this is a young kid. I know he's played professionally in Japan. It's not Major League Baseball though. And so I think that he does have the ability to be a dominant closer, but he's got to establish the fastball command and build that confidence back.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't go to him.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about the series, just from an individual perspective. There were times where it looked like, Max Muncy was just going to have a bad series. He hit a huge home run that brought them back within 1 off of Trey Savage, right? And that's where Jeff Hoffman's comments after the game, I know the homer he gave to Miguel Rojas is the one more people are going to remember. If you already forgot a home run from Game 7, it was probably Muncy's home run off of Savage. That one just sort of disappeared because at the time it looked like just a late homer that wasn't actually going to make that much of a difference. Little did we know, it was actually going to make a huge difference because without that, Miguel Rojas doesn't tie the game with that home run.
Yeah. I mean, you
Hoffman.
This is one of the things. I know that some people will crow, I made the right call or I made the wrong call or this or that, or, and use this as a definitive example of, I don't know, baseball's economy being broken or the Dodgers being great or the Blue Jays being paper tigers or whatever it is. But this went 7, dude. This went to the very last out. And I think, it's hard for people to think about it this way, but I think if you re-rack this, I think the multiverse has actually been good for conversation about baseball. In the other universes, the Blue Jays won this game, and there's other universes where this 7-game series was different. And, you could pick different heroes and goats from the same game. Like Ohtani could have been the reason the Dodgers lost, Like he did not pitch well. He was tired. They shouldn't have left him in for the 3rd. I don't know why he pitched the 3rd inning. He gave up a bunch of runs at the beginning of this, and that could have been it. It could have been zeros all the way through. Savage, he turned from hero to goat for that homer. The one that really makes me scratch my head, is really, we were talking about this before, is Isiah Kiner-Falefa.
Yeah, I don't like to just pick on anybody for the sake of picking on them, but I think if you're a Jays fan and you're sitting there today and you're saying, this one feels like it got away, you have to think about your bases loaded situation in the 9th inning. Dalton Varsho's at the plate. And
the pitch
Yamamoto's
is about
pitching.
to be thrown. Like this, he's set and he's about to throw.
And I think a lot of folks caught onto this real quick. I think it was covered maybe on Sportsnet in their post-game show because it's a few people in our Discord are in Canada and we're watching that feed. Isiah Kiner-Falefa did not have anything for a lead off of third base. And then it turned into a forced play at home. It's the play where Miguel Rojas had that little kind of double clutch before he got it home. Almost had to go to, that could have, it went to replay, but that could have been overturned as a safe call if Isiah Kiner-Falefa had, I think, a pretty normal lead off of third base. So, Jed, how much of that is on IKF? How much of that is on the third base coach standing there right behind him, just saying, "Hey, take a little more, take a little more." Like, I just found that whole situation to be extremely frustrating because they should have been able to play to run in those circumstances.
Yeah, you're looking at this. The general rule is you can get as far off as the infielder is away from the base, right?
Yeah,
because you got to beat him back to the bag, right?
and so there's really two options from a base runner in this perspective. You either start where IKF is right there, and you get a big secondary lead to get out to where the fielder is. But the risk there, if you are worried about getting doubled off, your momentum is taking you in the wrong direction. So in that situation, I would have loved to have seen him get off, and maybe it's just a half a step inside of Muncy. So if, in the very low chances of Dalton Varsho hitting a screaming line drive down the third baseline where Muncy dives, catches it, and touches the base, that you're still that half a step closer to him. From the looks of that photo, he's about 5, maybe 6 feet short of where he could have been.
He's like one step, and Muncy's like 5 steps off.
Yeah, so I'd be advocating for him to be further off with no secondary, right? Just be far off and just be able to react one way or the other. And so really big primary, virtually no secondary, so your momentum isn't taking you away just in case he does hit that line drive. But I see this as, they were really aggressive on the bases. The first 6 games, it burned them. Obviously, game 6 ended with, what you could call bad base running. Barger, it was bad base running. Barger was just over aggressive, really wanted to score that tying run, gets doubled off. And I think everybody just got a little tight on the base running, and they were erring on the side of caution. And unfortunately, this moment came back to bite them in the next game with the overreaction.
I think that's a fair thing to bring up. It's, the game 6 is lost in our schedule a little bit just because of, that was, that was the game before the game 7, and we didn't have a pod that day. But, just to have that discussion, Barger was probably a little bit far off, but I did see a mathematical sort of investigation of his lead and what was going on there. And basically, he had a lead that suggested that it was that it was like a 3/4, that it was likely to be a hit, right? So the lead that he had was, the read that he had was, this is like more likely than not to be a hit. Mm-hmm. And the catch probability was 60%. So the read was not fully off. It was just slightly, a little bit too aggressive, right? Like his read was like, this is a 75% hit, and it was actually a 60% hit. And that's how he got caught off. So it looks a little bit less bad in the numbers, but with that being the last out, I think you might want to be like, if it's a 60% chance of being a hit, I should be at a 50% line, right? Like I should be a little bit more cautious, maybe.
Yeah. So watching the replay there, it was more of the reaction. Like, he, first of all, as a base runner in that situation, you have to know where the outfielders are, right? And Kike Hernández is not going to be, he's more worried about the hit in. So I don't know. I guess in that scenario, the 60% hit, and does this account for where the outfielders are playing, or just in a vacuum? I'm assuming it's a vacuum.
No, it's the outs above average type thing where
they
have the beginning spot.
Right. Okay. So if you're looking at it, if you know where the outfielder is, you know who the hitter is, then you have to take all of that into account. And even when he kind of turns around as a base runner to see the outfielder, he never kind of works his way back. He continues, he stays out. And as you see Kike closing on that ball, you have to start
change the math.
Start working
like,
your
he's
way
going to
back.
make this. He's making this. He's going to.
And
make
he made it on his feet running in. It's not like this was a diving play that he had to sell out for.
So the lead wasn't as bad as the reaction, the sort of secondary or tertiary reaction.
The secondary lead, exactly. That secondary lead. So the lead, fine. What that is almost irrelevant in that. It's the secondary lead getting off of the base after the ball has been hit. As soon as you turn, you have to see where that, how that outfielder is
He
running.
should be
And
working back to the bag already.
yeah, like you can tell as a base runner, if you have the reps and if you have the knowledge, that if he is closing on a ball like that, you can see the trajectory of that ball. You have to be able to be autonomous enough to read that and work your way back to the base, because you can't end a game like that. It was over aggressiveness. He's, young kid trying to be not necessarily the hero, but trying to score that, game tying run. And it ended up burning them. And I don't know if they had a meeting about, being a little less aggressive on the bases,
Or maybe
it
was like an emotional reaction. Just like, you had that
well,
big
yeah,
play in game 6 and you don't even have to talk about it. You're like, oh, stay close to the bags today.
Yeah, exactly. That, maybe IKF is reading the headlines and everybody's blaming Barger and what bad base running is, and he doesn't want to be that guy in game 7. And it ends up being the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, Barger had a very good series otherwise, too. It was just one of those moments that will sour a lot of folks on how well he actually played throughout. I thought his base running in game 5 was really good. He was very aggressive on the base pass in a positive way in that game, and added some insurance that didn't end up making a big difference. But nevertheless, I just think he was an important player for them throughout the entire 7-game series. Will Smith ends up being the big hero. We haven't even said his name yet, and we're almost 21 minutes in. He hits the homer off of Shane Bieber in the 11th. And this is another flip-flop. I don't think Will Smith was having a bad series by any stretch, but we talked about it at the end of game 5. He looked cashed because he caught all 18 innings of game 3. They had that 3-game stretch in the middle of the series without an off day. I wondered if he'd get his legs back for either of the final 2 games. And, well, he had just enough in the tank to take that hanging slider from Bieber out to give the Dodgers the lead that ultimately won the game.
I think his cleats are going to the Hall of Fame. He caught more innings than anyone has ever caught in the World Series. I think that's partially because of the 18 innings that you're talking about.
I think Keith Law had the stat. This World Series had more innings played than any other World Series.
Yeah, but I mean, for what we talked about on this show, how catchers suffer a bigger decline in the postseason than any other position. And I've theorized that that's just the fatigue of the role over the course of the season. So for Will Smith, who could barely even catch as the season ended, to go out in the postseason and have a 276, 364 OBP, 414 slugging, with 2 really big homers in this postseason, that hats off to him. I mean, you could make a case for MVP for him, really, but with Yamamoto just stand out like he's doing, I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah, there was really, I think, once Yamamoto came back in and was 2 2/3 scoreless for that 3rd appearance in the series, that put it over the top. That was enough to seal it.
But we're inches away from him giving up the winning run.
Yeah,
I mean that's why I think this. I mean, that's probably why this was such a great series in estimation. Is that it really could have. There was these tiny little moments where it could have gone either way, and you can see it. You can see it. If IKF takes one more step in his lead, he's safe. That's how close it was.
Yeah, and I mean, Will Smith, to your point, for him to do what he did offensively, and you could make the argument that everybody that not named Shohei Ohtani had really had underperformed from the Dodgers. Like they, as a team, they just looked tired. I think that 18-inning game ended up, coming back and biting them games 4 and 5. We talked about this before hitting record, but Schneider actually was getting a little bit of bad press because he took all of his starters out in game 3. It ended up working out very well for him games 4 and 5. But yeah, the Dodgers offense, they showed up when it mattered, right? Game 7, Muncy showed up when it mattered. Will Smith showed up when it mattered. They got the big hit when they needed it, but it certainly wasn't a dominating performance.
I mean, Edman had an 11 WRC plus. He was one of their heroes in the last year's run. Mookie Betts had a 27 WRC plus in the World Series. He had a 138 slugging. Enrique Hernández has been a guy for them. He had an 18 WRC plus with a 179 batting average. Teoscar and Freddie were closer to league average in terms of, especially postseason league average. So they weren't awful. And Teoscar and Freddie both had sort of big moments with their homers. Obviously Freddie had the walk-off homer. So the only players that played above average for the Dodgers in the World Series were, with the bat, were Max Muncy with a 116 WRC plus, Will Smith with a 140, and of course Shohei with a 224. So Shohei did a lot of lifting.
The getting on base 9 times certainly didn't hurt that.
Really helped. Yeah. 500 OBP for the series.
Yeah. A lot of freebies mixed in there, which I kind of want to live in the multiverse where the Jays didn't do that and just see how that would have fared for them over the course of the series as well. But I do think that 18-inning game, if that doesn't happen in game 3, maybe it happens in game 5, that changes the complexion of everything. Or if it just goes 9, if game 3 just went 9 and it's still a Dodgers win, games 4 and 5 are completely different just in terms of health and who's available and how everybody feels on those days. So there's some very fun kind of what if scenarios if you want to.
Springer was also very limited in the games after his bad swing. You could tell it. He was wincing. I mean, he got a single and he gutted it out, but like that wasn't prime. That wasn't like Springer has he been all year, you know.
He three hits in that game.
I know. Yeah.
He struck out 3 times. We get 3 hits.
Grinder
with an oblique strain. I mean, like that's unbelievable that happened. I think the play that I keep seeing in my head that we still haven't talked about yet is, I think, Ernie Clement's ball that was hit to left center field, where Andy Pages, who had just entered as a defensive replacement, comes in, takes it away from Kike and just plows him. That could have been a huge disaster. That could have been the game right there, too. That was an unbelievable play. That probably gets, second, third, fourth position.
Kike was going to catch that ball, right? I mean, Kike was kind of under.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it would have been Willie Mays part 2, right? Like that. I mean, he was running this way. I mean, Jim Edmonds, however we're going to call it. I don't see him catching that ball the way that he was running after it. So I think Pages coming in that moment.
The right thing.
Yeah, I mean, and there's another moment where you got Ernie Clement up. Kike is playing, shallow because he's not expecting Ernie to drive that ball over his head, and so Pages comes out of nowhere. I mean, just absolute safety, and picks it off, and to your point, takes Kike out at the same time. So that was for a guy who didn't contribute as much offensively as he's capable of. He made, if not the biggest defensive play, one of the biggest defensive plays to set them up for the win. So that's Pages definitely did his part just with that one play.
Yeah, that one stands out to me in my head for sure. There was a smaller thing that if you're paying attention, you would have seen it for sure. Bo Bichette hit that big home run, but you could tell running the bases, he physically was well below 100%. They had a chance for him to score from second.
Yeah.
Had to hold him at third and then
they
left the
showed
bases
him
loaded.
Talking to the third base coach where you're just like, I know what he's saying. Like I should have scored, but I can't. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the brutal, I don't know, like unfortunate timing of the injury. At least he was able to play, but in that exact situation, almost anybody else on that roster running gets the green light and probably scores.
And it was too early in the game. Like
and then the 3-run homer doesn't. The 3-run homer doesn't happen. So so that's the classic managerial decision. Do you want the bat and sacrifice the potential for scoring on a base hit, with him on second? And it played out in both ways, right? Because you don't hit the 3-run homer off of Ohtani if you take him out. And, everyone's like, oh, well, he would have scored, that would have been the 4th run if he would have scored on that base hit. But once again, the 3-run homer doesn't happen if you take him out to score the run right there.
Vlad Jr. had a huge double in this game. was a
Oh.
leadoff double in the bottom of the 11th. It was the third highest win probability added play of the game. And my question for you guys is, would you have given up an out? Did you think bunting him from second to third with IKF was the right move in that decision? You're just down one, nobody's out. Would you have actually bunted there, or do you let IKF swing the bat and see if you can at least get a productive out, or maybe even something better that scores Vladdy?
With Yamamoto, I'm bunting. I think with that matchup of IKF and Yamamoto, I'm bunting. I'm
play for
trusting
one run.
Yeah, it just, because at that point, you're looking to, you're just looking to extend that game, because if you can tie that game right there, you are in the pole position to win. Anytime you have the opportunity to walk somebody off, you just got to get a zero on the top and score one run. So I thought that was the right call. Obviously, it didn't work out in the Blue Jays' favor, but I would have done that 100 times out of 100.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. just had a great series himself.
Yep.
It's too bad he ended up on the wrong side of this one, because I thought he showed leadership. There were some really interesting, quotes from him. And I really liked he came in with the Team Canada captain, the women's Team Canada hockey captain's jersey on. She was wearing his jersey. Immaculate vibes, really great defensive plays. That one where he cut the ball off and threw it to third was a great defensive play. He started a great defensive double play in this game, where he threw it to second and then got the ball back for a big double play. And he was hitting as well as anybody, and just a really great series. So
I know it's a long deal, but such a good deal for the Blue Jays, such a good deal for Canada to have a guy who, was born there. Obviously his dad plays there. And I mean, God, what an unbelievable player. The defense, because of what he does with his bat, his defense gets overlooked. But and this is a guy who, didn't come up as a first baseman, right? He was playing third base. He made the move over to first, has really leaned in, and has become a well above average first baseman and making big plays in big moments. I mean, that's what this guy does, whether it's with the bat or with the glove. I mean, he just did it all. We witnessed it, and it stinks that somebody had to lose this series, because there's so many quality players and extraordinary efforts made by Blue Jays players in this series.
I mean, both Dalton Varsho and Vlad made great catches in the fourth inning to keep what was a one-run inning from turning into a crooked number. That was critical in this game.
Yep.
And the bottom of that inning was the one where benches cleared because Andres Jimenez got hit by Justin Robleski after kind of waving his elbow at a pitch previously.
He looked like he wanted to get hit.
Yeah, that's the takeaway I think a lot of people have had. And then Jimenez comes back, I think, in his next plate appearance, and actually gets them an insurance run with a double off of Glass now. So again, the narratives on the individual players in this story or in this series were fluctuating wildly at every single term. But I don't know if the script writers could have done any better than they did with this whole series. But Game 7 in particular, I think, goes down as an instant classic. And
I think if I told you that there were 6 Blue Jays that had a 137 WRC plus or better, then you would have expected that they won that series.
Yeah, I can't come away with a conclusion other than it really feels like a series that got away. Like they definitely were good enough to win that series. They had chances to win that series, and it was just that close. And as Jed said, unfortunately, someone has to lose. Both teams can play well, and one is still going to lose in a 7-game series like this. A lot of people now focusing on the offseason already. Yeah, it's been, a whole 12 hours since the season ended. But the question people were already asking throughout the series was, is baseball healthy? And are the Dodgers bad for baseball? I was prepared if the Jays wanted to still make an argument that the Dodgers are a dynasty already. Like the way they're built. They're built to be perennial contenders, to play deep into October or into November now. every single year.
But I could see it slowing down a little bit because they looked a little bit old. So the lineup looked a little bit old in this one. And that's what eventually happens to every team that's built in free agency. So, that's something to think about, I think, when you think about it. But, in terms of like money and, payroll and stuff like that, this wasn't really David versus Goliath. I mean, the Blue Jays have a top 5 payroll. What this should be is a celebration of two teams that made the investment needed, that went out there and invested in players and made signed big deals. And, both these teams were in the final 3 for Shohei. These are teams that were willing to go to the mat and get big names and get good players in there, and they were worth it. The $500 million Vladdy was worth it. The big George Springer was their first big deal, and he was worth it. So I see this as a celebration of teams that made the investment and profited off it.
Kevin Gossman was a big free agent addition for them a few years ago, right? Like they spent money to retain Jose Barrios. He didn't pitch in the series. They spent money when they added Andres Jimenez via trade. There's just up and down. There's a clear willingness to get better and to add in that regard. And I think that is a big part of how the Jays were able to make the strides they made in 2025.
Yeah, and to talk about the Dodgers again, I agree. They looked old. They looked tired towards the end of the series, but they've also got one of the best farm systems in the game. They have a great development, program. They're going to continue to use resources that they have that other teams don't to feed that pipeline. So while they might have to, take a small step back in terms of the names, I think the way that organization is built and set up with the pipeline that they have and the resources available to them, that this is more of a plug and play situation as opposed to the full reboot you would see from a lot of other organizations.
Yeah. And I think, the trades might be where they do it again because
right.
I agree with you that there are some exciting, like Jose De Paula, Zir Hope, like they have some really good players, but I don't really see a shortstop. And I know that there have been a lot of flowers for Mookie Betts, and I want to give him his flowers for being such a good shortstop after the career he's had, the age he's at. But I would not continue to bet that Mookie Betts is going to be a top half shortstop going forward. I mean, it's a question of age, and just teams in the past have not really had mid to late 30s shortstops. It's just
defensively or offensively?
Defensively.
Okay.
So I mean, offensively, I think he can still be in there, and I think he'd be a pretty good second baseman. But they don't really have a shortstop coming up, and they don't have. And that would be a pain point for me is shortstop. And I'm glad that they found Pages, and developing Pages and Will Smith is really important because I agree that with the old truthism in baseball, you want to be good up the middle, young and good up the middle. I think it's been one of the problems in San Francisco, actually, frankly, is just they've never, they're not that good up the middle. Bailey's really good defensively, but, so Smith and Pages are really important, but I see shortstop as a pain point, and some of these guys nearing the end of their deals, I think, Freddie Freeman's too good. He's going to play, but he's going to be worse and worse every year, and so I think that there could be, I wouldn't just make them favorites for the World Series next year.
Yeah, well, there's a long winter ahead. To the title below us here.
Yeah.
So they're and once again they have these highly regarded prospects, to your point, in the trade market that they can go out and make a move if they think it's the right one for the organization. But I think the way that it's built and the way that their players are viewed around the league, they're set up for success, long-term success. They're certainly capitalizing on the, what they have right now, obviously back-to-back World Series. But I think that they are set up for future success for the foreseeable future.
I'm a little bit worried about the Blue Jays too. if you look at their payroll numbers right now, they have $221 million already accounted for in 2026. They spent 280 this year. If they are willing to go over those first two aprons again, and actually all three aprons, and spend 280 again, that still only gives them, $50-60 million to spend. And I know that sounds like a lot, but they're losing Chris Bassett, Max Scherzer, Shane Bieber, Bo Bichette, Seranthony Dominguez. Those are important losses. Right now, for next year, they have Gossman, Barrios, and Savage in the starting rotation, and that sounds pretty good. But for $50 million, you're going to chew up a lot of that filling out your rotation. I mean, Scherzer himself was $16 million this year. So if you have two veteran guys there, that's $30 million. You might have $20 more million to spend, and you got a Bo Bichette size hole to fill. And I don't know that Bichette is a shortstop anymore. But Hernández was good enough that maybe they could bring Bichette back as their second baseman next year. So I don't want to leave that off the table. They probably do have enough money to do Bo Bichette and two veteran type starting pitchers. But will those veteran type starting pitchers be as good as Max Scherzer was this year?
Well, and Max Scherzer wasn't all that good until the World Series.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I'm a Bo Bichette. I'm a big believer. I love his game. I think he's just a ball player. I think he'd be willing to play second base. And then, if you're looking at it, I don't want to be too wet of a blanket here, but you don't really know what you have in Savage for the regular season. I know he performed really well.
We've been trying to dance around that here on Rates and Barrels. I think there's been a lot of people sort of anointing him. And I do think he's a young, exciting talent, but the command is not always there, and it's a really weird slider. So I don't know that we can just be like, oh yeah, this guy's a number one, number two right away.
Yeah, and nothing but respect for his performance in the postseason, but the regular season, making 30 starts is very different than working your way up through this. And the guy showed a lot of moxie, right? And so you're going to trust that. It's just that do you trust the stuff over 30 games to with
multiple
three pitches?
Looks. When guys get to see it more often, dude, when the Yankees see him for the third time in the season, what's that like?
Yeah, and so and how does the funky slider play? Over the course of over 30 starts. So I think I trust the guy's ability to go out and perform. It's just the stuff over the 30 starts is and then health.
And then Gossman's a year older, so it's like when going into this playoffs, the numbers suggested that their rotation was one of the worst rotations in the playoffs, and their bullpen was not one of the better ones. So if you wanted to do better next year in the postseason, I think you would circle that staff as something you wanted to improve. So it's going to be really hard to do that with $60 million and losing so much. How are you? You can't just stay the same. You want to get better, and I think that'll be their offseason dilemma. Do we trade some minor league assets to get better pitching? Do we just believe that Savage is our future? Do we, what do we do in free agency? Do we let Bo Bichette go so we can get a better pitcher?
That last part's a tough call. I think because they've pushed themselves back up to the top 5 in payroll, I'm not going to write off the possibility that 280 or 300 million is the number next year. Maybe it goes up one more time, and they have an appetite to chase that title again and to bring back Bo
get
and
Fromber
get
or Cease
or Ranger Suarez or Cease. I think they're so right-handed. I could see a lefty being a priority. Maybe they bring back Eric Lauer. I think he's got 1 year of ARB left. He was good for them in the regular season. Maybe he's your 5. I could see a few kind of simple things getting them close to the level they were at in the regular season, and if they have that appetite to go spend over the top to keep and add, then they could be right back in this position next year. But they have a division full of hungry teams that are all going to be competing for some of those free agents as well, or trying to make big trades of their own. So
I got a little bit of a head start on them too, in terms of thinking about changing coaches, and they've been working on it already.
Yeah, I do think the pitching is the area where I'm a little more concerned about the Jays for next year, just wondering how they put those pieces back together on that side. But it was a fun team to watch throughout this postseason, and I'd love to see them try to get it all back together.
Especially with they played the game. I think that they zigged right when everybody was zagging. That was and it worked, right? Like you had a group of guys who put the ball in play, who they were aggressive early in the counts, but they have thump, but they didn't have a bunch of guys that were just going up there trying to hit home runs. And Ernie Clement, I mean, had one of the best postseasons ever. And does he continue to do that? I don't know, but I love the idea that they had a very clear identity as a team that was different than the majority of teams in Major League Baseball, and it worked.
I mean, a great defensive team too. I think that was the other thing that popped for the Jays this year. They were really good on that side throughout the entire season. That makes your pitching play up, takes a little pressure off your bats because you're keeping the number of runs you need every night at a more healthy sort of level. I wonder too if the success of the Jays, if you're a team that was similar to them, I think in the postseason field, we kind of circled the Brewers as one that was built very similarly. You think about the way Cleveland does it year in and year out. When you see a team like Toronto go 7 in a series like this and clearly have their opportunities to win, does it fortify your process if you're one of those more contact-oriented, defense-first sort of teams? Because this is also this is a roster type that you can build in those smaller markets. I wonder if that keeps some teams chasing it the way they had already pursued it, even in Milwaukee, where they got swept. It did not go well against that Dodgers team, even though they had some of the similarities of the Jays.
I think there's a specific thing though that happened which that we talked about this, that almost every Blue Jay swung the bat harder in the second half and swung the bat harder in the playoffs. And so they were a team that made contact, but that wasn't necessarily their identity by itself. It wasn't a team that was like softly trying to put the ball in play. They were trying to sting the ball. They were swinging hard, and they were swinging hard over the course of the season. So if I were in those places, I would that was what I would take from it is it is good to have a team that makes a lot of contact. Can we copy what they did over the course of the season? Or can we up our bat speed as a team? Can we take what's inherently good bat to ball and up our bat speed as a team? Can we like take more chances? Can we collect bat to ball guys, but get more out of them? Cleveland has had a hard time doing that, frankly. They've tried to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Cleveland in the same class. I mean, but the
Padres are a team that I think of, because the Padres had the second best strikeout rate, and they had guys who can hit the ball hard, but they kind of didn't do that. I also think that Luis Arias becomes a really interesting free agent. Because, if you're like the Mariners and you're like, we really need to make more contact, does Luis Arias become more attractive? Because from a wins or replacement standpoint, he's not an attractive free agent. Yeah. Because he does not field well. He does not run well. He does one thing.
Yeah. Where do you play him?
I don't like that as a roster fit. If my team had that sort of need and that was how they solved it, I think I'd be disappointed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think he can second, maybe. I mean, you have in Seattle in particular, you have a lot of guys who are coming up who can play really well defensively. And so, if I was a Mariners fan and they signed Naylor and Arias, I might be okay with that.
But that's a problem because, you got Cal that needs the DH some. It's not a fit. It's not a fit with, if you have Naylor too, it's not a fit. Because you got to be able to play him at first.
If he's not a fit there, then it's not a really great fit anywhere. I mean, you guys might be right, but I just think I find him really interesting because if this becomes the buzzword, we need to make more contact. We need to make more contact. We need to make more contact dance. Then Luis Arias is like, oh, we're making more contact. Check it out.
Well, but I think so. Contact to me, you hit this earlier. It's not like you're going up there just trying to hit the ball. That's silliness. Like you're trying to hit the ball hard. And I've said this, probably from the first episode, and you guys are probably tired of me saying it, but it's intent, right? It's intent. And all those Blue Jays players, they were trying to hit the ball hard, but not necessarily trying to lift the ball. And I think that, you got guys like Bo Bichette that's going to hit a 440-foot homer, but also hit a missile down the right field line. That's really hard to pitch against, because no matter where you're pitching, no matter where you're throwing it, you have an opportunity to give up a hard hit ball. And that's when your odds go up. So to me, it all boils down to intent, right? And so you have the intent and then the pitch recognition. They obviously have good pitch recognition, good bat to ball skills, but they're trying to hit the ball hard, and that doesn't necessarily mean pull in the air.
So when I hear you talk like that, I think that one of the most important things that I could do as a Guardian front office person or a Padre front office person or a Brewer front office person is investigate my hitting coaching. And I'm not saying that the Brewers did badly and they need to fire their hitting coach, but intent sounds like something you can coach.
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. Intent is everything. Because like I said, if and this is agnostic to the type of player you are. I mean, you and this is why power is so valuable in the game. Having consistent power in the game is so valuable, because if you have consistent power, but you're still making quality contact in those other at bats, that's a gift. Right? If you have guys that aren't capable of hitting for the power that they're trying to, then they just aren't effective. They might hit a home run every once in a while. And that's, easy to predict and when it comes to modeling, but it doesn't help you win the games when it matters.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the hard hit rate leaderboards for teams. Cleveland, dead last, 35.8%. Padres, second to last, 37.8%. And again, a player like Arias can pull you down a couple of spots.
But the names on the jerseys, there were some other names that could be hitting the ball harder in San Diego.
There were, but that roster, that group of position players was a little more flawed than people were acknowledging, I think. They did something at the deadline to enhance it, for sure, bringing in O'Hearn and Laureano, but like the pre-deadline Padres, and Merrill was hurt. The pre-deadline Padres were a little underwhelming relative to expectations. So
were the Blue Jays near the top in hard hit rate? Sorry, you were just making a point.
They were tied for 11th.
But
and by comparison, the Brewers were 25th. They were 39.2%, so about 2 full percentage points down. I think there's a pretty big difference there, 2 percentage points as a team.
Yeah. But you can, if you're in Milwaukee, you can say it worked with Turang. We took a guy who made a lot of contact. We upped the intent. We said, hey, you're killing it in batting practice. Why don't you take that over into the game? You can do damage. So if you can kind of find that with Joey Ortiz or with some other guys, then you can kind of bring the bottom of that roster up. Or, I hate to say it, Milwaukee, just a tiny bit more investment, I think, in the team. I think on the level,
it's not my money.
$20 million more dollars, would make that you might be able to improve in some key points.
Just to really drive the nail in here is like intent. Like the intent that I'm talking about is just hitting the ball hard, right? Like just like and contact point and the pitch that you swing at will determine the outcome, essentially.
If you like basically take the ball where it's given you, like to go with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're going to be a consistent threat, if you're going to go up there and, sure, you might hit 20 or 30 homers, but if there is a hole that you have, it's going to get exploited more often than not at the major league level.
I think to the other point on the Cryon, or the part of the Cryon, I think baseball is actually healthy, despite columns and folks out there that are going to try and tell you otherwise. I don't think the Dodgers winning back-to-back World Series is a sign that the sport is in some kind of peril.
The viewership numbers are great. The people like them. I've seen research that suggests that dynasties are good for a sport, and I think that's hard to understand if you're a big fan, as our listeners are. If you're a big fan of the sport, you might say, why would that be? But if you are a fair-weather fan, if you are a fan that just turns into the World Series, you know why Dynasty is good? Oh, I remember these guys. I know these guys. I have feelings. Either I hate Freddie Freeman or I love Freddie Freeman, but I know him. I remember him from last year,
Yeah. Well, I think that to your point, the Dodgers have not broken baseball. I do think there's an argument to be made that you have a subset of organizations that and fan bases go into the season, knowing that their team is not going to make the playoffs. And I think that lack of, and you look even this year, the number of playoff teams that were in the top 15, the top half of the payroll, it was the overwhelming majority of playoff teams were in the top 15 of payroll. So I think from a payroll perspective, it's not the Dodgers at the top. It's more, the lack of parity from the bottom 15.
Right. The reason I have a little bit of optimism here is that I don't think you can get a floor, because if you want a floor, then you need a cap, and I just don't think the MLBPA wants that. However, the TV rights are changing, and I don't know if I'm misreading the situation, but Manfred's talking about nationalizing more of the TV revenue. And I think that could be a good thing for some of the smaller markets, because you're just basically taking more, like there's less of a difference on your TV money. So if there was a way, and I don't know if this is where they're headed, but if there was a way that all money was totally nationalized, all TV money, and everyone got the same amount of money from TV, I think that would be more money to the smaller markets.
Yeah, and
whether or not they spend it is a one question.
That's literally what I was just going to follow up with.
That's the question.
Exactly.
But maybe, that's why I think MLBPA is often wanted to put in language about, revenue sharing. That's why they care about revenue sharing. That's why they want to increase spending from the smaller market teams, and that's something that they've tried to with different pieces of language in terms of how revenue sharing money can be spent and stuff like that. But there's always the problem is, do these things actually have teeth? Does baseball ever actually enforce the rules about how much of your revenue sharing money should be spent on payroll? It doesn't really look that way.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the on-field product is what is how it's defined, right? And and we've talked a lot about organizations investing in the analytics and development. It's hard for me to say that doesn't actually improve the on-field product. Does it do it this year? May or may not. But over the long run, that type of investment should improve the on-field product. So that's where, unless there is a, even if it's a soft floor, right? That just seems to me there's got to be some way to address that brings a little bit more parity, forces, and I think at that point too, you're talking about, I know who Freddie Freeman is. It keeps guys around a little bit longer. If you're the veteran guy is no longer, if you get to 6 years at this point in your career, that's a really long career. There's just the replacement cost is so low.
Yeah, I think that's where some of the problems creep in too, but we'll save that for another day, because there is a lot to unpack there.
Pandora's box.
And more than a year, hopefully, before we can have that conversation.
This podcast may have to turn into that full time at some point next year.
We're going to brainstorm some good ideas. We're going to have a little bit of downtime here in November. We're headed to First Pitch Arizona at the end of this week, so we're going to have an episode from Arizona that's up early next week. By the time we get that turned around, looking forward to meeting some listeners for the first time, connecting with some folks that we've seen out there before. Should be a good time watching more baseball, because baseball never actually stops. It seems like it stops, but it doesn't actually stop.
We'll do the midwinter meetings. I think this year the focus will be on really having our excellent writers at The Athletic come and give us updates about what their teams are doing and what they're hearing. I think that might be the best use of all the resources at The Athletic. So you'll hear us on the winter meetings. We'll do breakdowns of the teams. And then we'll start all over again in the new year,
which will be here before you know it. So quick shout out to producer Brian Smith for helping us throughout this season, putting a ton of our episodes together. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.